For more exciting information on cryptocurrency, check out the description. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving into Bitcoin. More specifically, what's been happening in the markets recently.
Oh, right.
And we've got, well, a whole bunch of different sources, market analysis, news reports, research papers, all that. And they kind of point to some pretty interesting undercurrents in the crypto world, right?
Yeah, definitely. A lot going on under the surface.
Yeah, and it kind of begs the question, are we looking at like a new phase for Bitcoin? One where maybe it's getting a little more stable, maybe some long-term conviction is starting to really kick in. Maybe we're seeing more, institutions getting involved.
Yeah.
Or, is it all just built on, shaky ground, macroeconomic uncertainty, all this hype and these big price predictions? It could make you wonder.
Right.
I mean, you remember just a little while ago, Bitcoin had that, that pretty big price drop down to what, like 76,600 or something on March 11th. And then, bam, it bounces back up, which is, kind of wild.
Bitcoin's always been a wild ride, that's for sure.
Exactly. So let's really dig into this. Like, what's really going on here?
Yeah, let's get down to it. Let's start with the long-term holders, the people who have held Bitcoin for at least 155 days. Even with that price drop, the data is showing us that these guys aren't really selling.
Oh, that's interesting. So they're just kind of like holding on tight.
Pretty much. It's like they're not even fazed by the dips anymore. And this could be huge. It suggests that, maybe the market is maturing a bit. Maybe these seasoned investors are seeing something we don't. Maybe conviction is winning out over that, that knee-jerk reaction to sell when things get a little rocky.
Yeah, because in the past, a price drop like that would have probably caused, a good chunk of them to panic sell.
Yeah.
But they're not. So what do you think is going on in their minds?
Well, the research is pointing to, this idea that they believe the bull market's not over yet. They're in it for the long haul. They think the price is going to go up again, and they're willing to wait it out.
Interesting. So they're playing the long game.
Exactly. And this shift away from sell-side pressure, it's a pretty big deal. I mean, historically, when markets peak, you see this massive sell-off from those long-term holders. But this time, it's different. It's like they're saying, we're not going anywhere. We believe in Bitcoin.
Wow. When we were preparing for this, I came across something called the binary spending indicator. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah, the binary spending indicator. It basically it tracks when Bitcoin moves from older wallets, the ones that probably belong to those long-term holders, and when it moves to exchanges or other addresses that, suggest that someone's going to spend that Bitcoin. So a high reading means lots of spending, right?
Makes sense.
But what's happening now is the indicator's slowing down, meaning less movement from those old wallets, less spending.
So they're really holding on to their coins.
Yeah. Glassnode, they actually said that, let me see if I can find the exact quote. Here it is. A greater willingness to hold than to spend coins among this cohort.
So yeah, they're not budging.
Wow, so that's really interesting and kind of different from what we normally see, right?
Right, very different. And then on the other hand, we've got these new Bitcoin whales. These are the guys who are just jumping into the market and making a big splash.
Oh yeah, tell me about these whales. So who are they exactly? These are addresses, Bitcoin addresses, that hold at least 1,000 Bitcoin. But the key thing is their average acquisition age, the average time they've held those coins, is less than 6 months. So relatively new to the game, but coming in strong.
New money coming in, huh? And they're not messing around.
Nope. Since November 2024, these whales have accumulated over 1 million Bitcoin.
1 million Bitcoin. That's crazy.
It is. And it's not slowing down. In the past month alone, they've added over 200,000 Bitcoin to their holdings.
That's a lot of Bitcoin in a very short amount of time.
Yeah.
So what's the thinking behind this? Why are they buying so much so fast?
Well, on-chain, an analyst at CryptoQuant, they said that this buying spree highlights a shift in market dynamics, and it suggests increased institutional or high net worth participation. So basically, big players are getting in on the action.
Institutions. That's interesting. I mean, that could really change the game, couldn't it?
Absolutely. It could mean less volatility in the long run, as these big players are less likely to, panic sell at the first sign of trouble. They're in it for the long game. And the fact that they're willing to invest so much, it really shows a strong belief in Bitcoin's future.
Yeah, I mean, you don't throw around 1 million Bitcoin if you don't think it's going somewhere.
Exactly. It's a pretty big statement.
It is. And speaking of big statements, there's this price prediction that keeps popping up. $250,000 for Bitcoin by the end of 2025. I mean, it's a pretty bold prediction, especially after, the recent price swings we've seen. What do you think? What's fueling this optimism?
Yeah, it's a big number, no doubt. But even with the corrections, even with the price going up and down, some experts are sticking to that prediction. And a big part of it is based on two things. First, the Federal Reserve.
The Fed? Okay. How does the Fed fit into all of this?
Well, there's a speculation that the Fed might step in, to try and stabilize the markets, and that could send the price of Bitcoin skyrocketing.
Okay, so how would they do that? What kind of actions could the Fed take?
Well, one possibility is they could pause or even end their quantitative tightening program. That's where they reduce the amount of money in circulation, tighten things up. Or they could shift gears and start easing again, inject more money into the economy, like quantitative easing, but, on steroids.
Wow. So either way, more money flowing through the system.
Right. And Arthur Hayes, he's a crypto trader. He's actually predicted that Bitcoin could hit that $250,000 mark once the Federal Reserve takes stern measures. So he's definitely betting on some kind of Fed intervention.
Interesting. And we've already seen how sensitive the markets are to, anything the Fed does. I mean, remember when they decided to hold interest rates steady?
Oh, yeah. The markets went kind of crazy after that. Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, even the stock market, they all got a boost.
Exactly. It was like everyone just breathed a sigh of relief.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you had Jerome Powell's press conference, trying to calm everyone down, and it seemed to work.
Yeah, it's crazy how interconnected everything is now. Traditional finance and crypto, they're not separate worlds anymore. They're all part of the same system.
For sure. And there's even talk that the Fed might end their quantitative tightening program sometime in 2025, right? I mean, that would be a huge signal.
Oh, absolutely. Noelle Atchison, she said that such a move would basically signal that, let me get the quote right, we're in a new monetary regime and that the Fed stands ready to resume additional debt purchases should QE become necessary again.
So basically, a new era of easy money.
Right, and that could have a huge impact on the crypto markets.
For sure. So the Fed's definitely a big factor to watch. And then there's this other idea, the U.S. government setting up a strategic Bitcoin reserve. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so the idea is that the government would create this reserve, the stockpile of Bitcoin, and they'd fund it with, Bitcoin that they've seized in legal cases like forfeitures and stuff.
Okay, so like a government-backed Bitcoin vault.
Right. And the prediction is that this would create a huge demand for Bitcoin. The government buying up all this Bitcoin, it would drive up the price. And not just for Bitcoin either. Other digital assets could see a surge too, like Ether, XRP, Solana, Cardano.
Wasn't that President Trump who mentioned those specific coins?
Yeah, he did. He actually announced those 5 as, likely to be included in the strategic reserve. And guess what? Their market value spiked after that.
So the government really does have the power to, move these markets.
It does. But, the details of this whole reserve thing, they're still pretty murky. Like, how would it actually work? What would be the benefits for taxpayers?
Right. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. It's all very, very speculative at this point.
It is, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. So we've got long-term holders holding strong, new whales buying like crazy, the Fed potentially shaking things up, and the government maybe becoming a major Bitcoin holder. And then, of course, you had those tariff announcements from President Trump earlier this month. What was the impact of that on the crypto world?
Well, anytime there's big news like that, it creates uncertainty, and that makes investors nervous. So you saw this risk-off sentiment in the markets, and that led to a correction. Stock prices went down, crypto prices went down. It was like a domino effect.
Yeah, it's amazing how quickly things can change.
It is. But, Jerome Powell, he tried to downplay the whole tariff thing. He said the effects on inflation would be transitory, so, not a long-term problem.
Right, trying to reassure everyone.
Exactly. But it just goes to show how connected everything is these days. Traditional markets, crypto markets, they're all reacting to the same events, and they're all influencing each other.
You could really see that in how everyone reacts to the Fed.
Yeah.
It's like the entire financial world is holding its breath, waiting to see what they're going to do next.
Absolutely. And it's not just the Fed, it's everything. News events, political developments, economic indicators, it all has an impact.
Yeah, it's a complex and constantly evolving landscape. And it's important to remember that not everyone's, super bullish on Bitcoin's future.
Right. I mean, we have Ki Young Ju, he's the founder and CEO of CryptoQuant, and he's actually saying that the bull run is over. He thinks we're in for, let me see, 6-12 months of bearish or sideways price action.
So not everyone's convinced that, Bitcoin's just going to keep going up and up.
Nope. There are definitely different opinions out there, and it's important to, to consider all of them.
So let's bring it all together. We've got these long-term holders who are in it for the long haul, new whales who are pouring money into Bitcoin, the Fed potentially playing a major role, and the government maybe becoming a big player. But we also have some experts who are saying, hey, be careful, this bull market might be coming to an end. What does it all mean? What's the takeaway for someone who's, following the crypto markets?
Well, it means that things are really heating up, and it's going to be a wild ride. You've got long-term conviction, new money coming in, and macroeconomic forces that could push the price of Bitcoin in any direction. It's a really exciting time to be watching the crypto markets.
It is, but it's also, a little nerve-wracking. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of conflicting information.
True. And that's why it's so important to, to do your research, to stay informed, to be aware of all the different factors at play.
Exactly. Don't just jump in blindly. Understand the risks, understand the potential rewards, and, make informed decisions. So here's a final thought for all of you listening. When you think about all of this, the long-term holders, the new whales, the Fed, the government, all these different forces, which one do you think is going to have the biggest impact on the future of Bitcoin? And what does that mean for the rest of the crypto market? It's a really interesting question to think about. We got individual conviction, institutional strategy, and global economic forces all colliding. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out. For more exciting information on cryptocurrency, check out the description.
Definitely. It's going to be a wild ride.
For sure.